owing to the worsening plight of awaiting trial inmates in the country's prisons, which are currently identified as correctional centers. How much reformation is going on behind these prison walls in line with the new policy direction of the Substantive Act? And why a criminal case is still being treated with such snail speed as a matter of secondary consideration in Nigerian courts? Beyond the change of name from prison to correctional center, what else has changed? Well, Ben Abraham is a lawyer and executive director of Zarifat Aid, a non-governmental organization that is focused on criminal justice system and prison reform. And he has joined us now to have a chat around this. Good morning and welcome to the show, Mr. Abraham.
Good morning.
Thank you.
The pleasure is mine to be here. Good morning, viewers.
Yes. Well, let's start with this. So we hear these terms thrown around, prison reform and reformation within the prison system. Are we talking about two different notions here, or this is just a play on semantics?
Well, you have the prisons, which is now dubbed correctional facilities. This is a facility, a building, but then what goes in there, or what goes on about that facility, is not only about that facility. We have a system called the Criminal Justice Administration System. The courts are involved, lawyers are involved, the police is involved, the judiciary is involved, the Ministry of Justice is involved. These all form parts of the system. So the prisons is just one part of it. But of course, like I always said, the prison is a holding center. It's the garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. What you give them to keep is what they keep. What you ask them to release is what they release. But then we cannot say we shouldn't look at the prisons, because lives are held there. What goes on in the prisons are of utmost importance, not just to them, but to us. Because if they live there and they are not rehabilitated, or they don't have that sense of reform, it's going to be danger when they leave. There are instances...
If they come out hardened.
Okay? Because there are facilities that ought to be there while they are there. Of course, there is congestion because of so many things. I've just read out the parts of the system. But while they are there, we need to strive to get the system better, the prisons in particular. Otherwise, when a person, like we've seen in some instances, has stayed in prisons, correctional facilities, and we say he's waiting for his day in court and stays 12 years. We've released, for example, an inmate. You know, when they call awaiting trial, what they call awaiting trial, a lot of people have the understanding that they attend courts every other day. No, not all of them. There is this group, sadly, who are waiting for the DPP's advice. These are situations, these are cases that the magistrate court cannot try. They are felonies. The robbery, the murder. Okay, the police now has to remand them. The magistrate remands them in prison custody for their files to go to the DPP. Then the legal advice will have to come out. We have seen instances where people have waited for the legal advice for 12 years. Our organization, particularly, we have released people over the years, and on a particular situation, a young man stayed 12 years awaiting not trial in courts, because at the end of the day, that advice may come out, and the advice will say, you have no case to answer. So he has waited for 12 years, waiting to know whether he has a case to answer.
But what's responsible for that? How did we even get to the point you're waiting 12 years?
Yes.
Or more in some instances.
Yes.
Some instances. At present, we have situations where we have 5 people in an application now who have said a cumulative length of 50 years, having been arrested in 2012, each of them. The application is pending, so I'm not going to speak about that. Now, the practice is this. When the police arrest someone, the rightful thing to do, of course, is to do investigation, then charge the person to court.
Yes.
The offenses differ. Here in Nigeria, our system makes it that there are levels of offenses that the magistrate courts cannot try. The magistrate courts are the lowest rung of the system. They interface every day. The workload for them is quite much. That's why you try cases like of stealing, pilfering, affray, and all that.
Divorce and stuff.
No, not divorce. They don't have divorce.
Oh, they don't? Okay.
Yes. But these are the cases that come up every other day. Then you have these other cases, indictable offenses, felonies. They cannot be tried by the magistrate courts. They don't have jurisdiction to handle them. They can only be tried by information at the High Court. And when that will be done, then the case file has to be remitted to the Director of Public Prosecutions for trial at the High Court. The police will not try that. Because at the magistrate court, what we normally have is the lay prosecutors who come from the police department. Okay? Now, when these arrests are made for this group of offenses, the law provides for the magistrate to remand these people in prison custody. Then the police will have to duplicate the case file and send to the office of the DPP for legal advice. Over time, especially, we began this work 18 years ago. Now, we noticed, to answer your question, that gap, that journey, will I say, between or from the police to the DPP, for that file to travel and get to the DPP's office for attention, that was where we had the challenge. We had instances where you would see that files are missing, case files of human beings. The DPP will not work with anything except what you give him. And if these files are not transmitted, the person stays in detention ad infinitum. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And don't forget, most of them are indigent. Many families in Nigeria will assist a relation the first year, second year, and because many don't even have the money to engage a lawyer, they begin to pull back. Then when you get to prison, the welfare people will say, can you help in so case? His people don't come, they've abandoned him. And that kind of person will end up staying there for as long as, except something comes.
Well, Mr. Abraham, of what value is the Nigerian Correctional Service Act of 2019? I mean, does it address some of these sort of reforms that, the organization is open for? Of what value is it? How effective is that act?
Yes, the act repealed the Prison Act of 1972 and changed the name of the service from Nigeria Prison Service to Nigeria Correctional Service. There are quite a few lofty provisions there. One thing that I will point out has to do with the power of the superintendent of prisons to say, no, I'm not going to take further inmates in this facility because it's already overstretched. There's a provision for it there. But the problem also is in implementation. They have the will to say no when the court has ordered for someone else, an additional inmate, to be remanded. He may not come up with that will to say, no, I'm not going to take someone else. Say, okay, admit him. And you keep seeing people piling up, inmates piling up. It's easy to go in. It's not always easy to come out.
Okay. Well, crime is not going to stop anywhere in the world. What, therefore, will an organization like yours propose for government, for the Attorney General's office, for the AIDS agencies who are obviously, supporting, to do in the next, like a 5-10 year sort of program to make sure that people get justice and not languishing in jails for many, many years?
Yes. There is a particular chief judge of Lagos State we worked with, Justice Ade Alabi.
Okay.
It's one thing to know your powers, it's another thing to deploy those powers positively. I remember his Lordship came up with an idea when this kind of thing came up and said, look, I'm going to convene a meeting of all stakeholders. This is a short term. 5-10 years you mentioned is a much longer term, or at least a medium term. That's okay. But now in the short term, let me start with that. He now said, stakeholders come, prisons came, the police came, the Ministry of Justice came. Then some judges from the judiciary. He announced, then the NGOs, we were there. We had a round table and said, look, my vision is prison decongestion. I will fail in my duties. I will see myself as someone who has failed. If after my tenure as the chief judge of this state, we still have this kind of mess. at least let me do something with the powers I have. I'm going to do this. NGOs, civil society groups, come up with applications of people you think should no more be there. Let's vet it. Ministry of Justice, work hand in hand. Police, if you have the case files of these people, bring them out, move them to the Ministry of Justice. If they have a case to answer, let them start. Well, if they have nothing, NGOs come up with the applications and we will decide. I can tell you something for free that it worked so wonderfully. So many NGOs brought up applications, the court decided, and somehow in our organization, for example, I remember that fateful day, we released about 34 people at a go. There were people who have stayed 10 years awaiting trial in that group, some 8 years, some 7 years. And
do you follow up with them once they are out of the correctional services? That's
another challenge. You work only within the ambit of the resources you can afford, of course. But that is a point that we need to begin to look at.
Right. And of course, we're approaching the end of the segment, but very quickly, of course, through the benefit of your work, you are surely privy to the real plight of these trial inmates within the correctional facilities. Could you paint us a picture of what those situations are like, apart from the congestion issue as well?
When we talk about, we're in Lagos.
Yes.
Lagos is far, far, far better than many other places, even though Lagos still needs a lot. In
correctional facilities in Lagos.
Yes. Thank you. In these facilities, there is no potable water. No system, don't have the normal toilet systems there. I won't want to paint that picture because it won't be.
It's bad. It's gory.
Okay. So even this year, I remember we visited one of the facilities in Lagos and decided to write to organizations to assist. So, but we needed to know. Of course, the welfare took us to. So there's a point you can't go beyond. But we noticed that, for example, the soakaway system had blocked. For example, then he told us that the boreholes there are not functioning in Lagos. Then, outside Lagos, how will it be?
You can imagine.
The sleeping conditions, feeding, and all of that. So this is something I believe the campaign season is here again. For example, I feel that this should come up also as one of the things that should engage our discussions. In the run-up to 2023, at the state level, at the federal level. What are we doing about our prisons, about our correctional
Abi, I think one of the key things, takeaways from here, will be the sort of messages that your organization should be giving out is for people to try as much as possible to stay away from crime so that they don't end up.
But don't forget one thing before I leave. Not everybody that went in there really committed something.
That's true. Which is another major reason why this needs to be addressed in the interest of fairness and, of course, the criminal justice system. All right, we want to thank you so much, Mr. Ben Abraham, for joining us this morning. And, of course, we expect that you continue the great work.